As stated on the day immediately following the swearing in of the new Council of Ministers, in our first meeting with the governor right here, I said that a first priority for this government was to look into the national decree that was signed first on the 28th of October and then withdrawn and then signed again on the 29th of October, calling for the dissolution of Parliament. And in that decree, a date was set for elections being, I think it's the 9th of February. But what's interesting about the decree is that it goes into effect not on the day that the decree was signed, but it goes into effect on a date in the future, and in this case, the 15th of December. The new government, and supported as well by a decision by the majority in Parliament to reject the decision of the government to invoke Article 59, the government is busy exploring if you want to call it possibilities. We are preparing a new decree that will be submitted to the governor, hopefully by Friday, and if not, definitely by Monday. A new decree will be sent to the governor, and the intention is looking at the present decree and looking at the reasoning why the government said Article 59 was invoked to have new elections. Basically, the government is saying we want to stop ship jumping, and ship jumping is the cause of instability in government. We are the firm belief that if we hold elections, whether we hold them now, next week, next month, or next year, if the phenomenon of ship jumping is based on the electoral laws that we have in place, as long as we don't fix them, we won't fix ship jumping. All we would do is create a new set of ship jumpers. The first ship jumpers in the period of 2010, 2014 were all persons who were elected for the first time. Yes, one can say it was the first parliament, but it is the first time those persons were elected to office. We've had an island council of St. Martin before, we've had the Parliament of the Netherlands Antilles before, and the ship jumpers of 2010 to 2014, which was two of them, both were first-timers. The ship jumpers of 2010 to 2014 to present, four of them, also all of them were elected for the first time ever. So we see the ship jumpers increase from 2 to 4, and if we hold an election now, the analogy would be that it's either 2 multiplied by 2 is 4, multiplied by 2 would be 8, or if we say 2 plus 2 is 4, and if you keep adding 2 each election cycle, then when we have an election now, we would be faced with 6 ship jumpers. So if it is aimed just at punishing the ship jumpers who jump now, it does not solve the problem of potential new ship jumpers. Because if you remove those ship jumpers, let's say, from the scenario, then it would mean you're paving way for new ship jumpers to come on board. So we feel that if we are serious about bringing stability to government, and if we are serious about addressing issues in whether it's our constitution or our electoral laws, then we need to fix them, and an election won't fix them. They need to be fixed first. Some of the issues that we have, while members in Parliament were addressing the ongoing political crisis that we had then, created by the refusal of the then Prime Minister Marcel Gomes and members of his cabinet to tender their resignation in accordance with Article 33 of the Constitution. If you get a vote of no confidence, you have to make your position available. What did we see? Members of the UP faction then conveniently said the Constitution is flawed because it does not say when. Now, if we have an election and we don't address these as required by the Constitution in a national ordinance, then we would get the same thing again. If you have an election and a new government, and for whatever the reason, a minister or the Council of Ministers or more than one minister receive a vote of no confidence, then they can go along and tell you, you know what, I am not going to resign, or I'm going to resign, I'm going to make my position available, but in the next 3 years. Because what gives the Prime Minister or the former Prime Minister the right to say, I am going to resign only if the governor promises to do X? And it is clear they requested advice, and the advice they got clearly stated, this is not the way to go. Another issue that we have with this whole thing is that one of the professors, Mr. Professor Hirsch Berlin, who was also asked for advice, rendered an advice, but because that advice was not fitting the intention that the government had, the government never used that advice as part of the decision-making process. And if you put the advice of Professor Hirsch Berlin, who is a professor of constitutional law and a professor throughout Europe and in the Netherlands, and served in the past as a minister, I believe it was of justice. If we look at his advice, it clearly states that the Council of Ministers were wrong. You receive a motion of no confidence, you got to immediately make your position available. Secondly, once the Council of Ministers receive a vote of no confidence, they actually do not have that right or authority anymore to invoke Article 59. But if we also research professors and constitutional law experts like Rohir, he too, in documents, have stated kind of the similar direction that needed to be taken. We also have the late Carlos Dip, who we can consider one of the foremost constitutional experts in the kingdom. Papers written by him in the past and articles also clearly outline that there is a difference in interpretation of the right to dissolve Parliament as it was done in the past in the kingdom or in the Netherlands, and the practice and the direction it has taken in modern-day Netherlands, Antilles, and the Dutch Caribbean. So when we put all of these together, we would see that the decision to dissolve Parliament actually is one that should not have been taken by that outgoing Council of Ministers. And if we borrow a page from recent developments on Curaçao, we would see how that government, along with their governor, went about the entire process. There was no vote there wasn't a vote of no confidence against the Council of Ministers. A member of Parliament withdrew their support, so the government lost a majority, but the governor said, I'm giving you guys an opportunity to find a new majority and move forward. When are their elections scheduled to be held officially? In a year or less than a year from now. Yet the dissolution of Parliament was not an immediate option because there is a Parliament. In the case of St. Martin, we have a Parliament of 15 members. We have a majority in Parliament. We had a coalition agreement. We had a governing program that was endorsed by them, and we had candidate ministers ready to be screened. Yet, the dissolution of Parliament was decided upon, but what we are looking at is if, in taking the decision, government says, it will go into effect on a later date, then we are also saying, yes, the dissolution of Parliament, the decision has been taken, and we respect that. But in order for the election to be effective and meaningful, the government will first address the issue of constitutional change and other issues that need to be addressed in order. Is that being taken care of? The issues of constitutional change and the drafting and approval of the different national decrees to support the various articles in the Constitution and the electoral law. There are issues concerning the Electoral Council that needs to be addressed. There are issues concerning campaign financing that needs to be addressed. There are different issues that need to be addressed, and it is best to address them now and then hold the election. And that is actually the direction this government is seeking to take things. Another decision that was taken by the Council of Ministers is to immediately ask the Secretariat, the General Secretary, to provide an overview of all the decisions taken by the government from September 30th until leaving office. There are two sets of decisions that have been taken, decisions that are taken in the Council of Ministers, and we have decisions that have been taken by the ministers by ministerial decree, and some of it, or not some of it, most of it, the Secretariat bears no knowledge of in some cases, but it is all supposed to then be documented in DIV, and we have asked for the various general secretaries to provide that besides the transition document that each ministry should provide. So far, we have received an overview of decisions that were taken in the Council of Ministers, and the ministers are busy reviewing them to see if they would need additional information based on the decision they have seen. And we have received also so far only the list of decisions that came from the Ministry of Vromi. As Minister of Vromi at interim, I am going to take a critical look at some of the decisions that were taken in the Ministry of Vromi, but of course also across the board. Bear in mind also that several weeks ago, the Parliament of St. Martin, in a meeting, passed a motion by a majority. Of course, you need a majority to pass the motion, passed a motion in which they reminded the government that it was by virtue of the decision of no confidence that they no longer had the support of a majority in Parliament, and therefore, effective the 30th of September, the government of former Prime Minister Marcel Gomes became a démissionnaire government, a caretaker government, and therefore should be limited in their decision making. The Parliament in its motion also had a listing of activities that the government should refrain from, that they should not engage in and should not take decisions on. Lo and behold, some of it we have seen already in some of the preliminary, not preliminary, and looking quickly and scanning the list of decisions, we have noted several areas that the Parliament then say, hands off, don't take any decision. We have seen that the government then rushed into taking decisions. One of them that caught my eye is the appointment of board members to the central bank. There is no further information that I can gather, so I don't know whether it's one or two, and who those board members are and when the decision was taken, but it's obvious that it was taken after the 30th of September. Also, widely discussed the development agreement between the Ministry of Romi, the Minister of Romi, and the APS. There was even a debate in Parliament about it, and I think on the Wednesday before the government was sworn in, we have seen that the minister rushed over to the notary to sign an agreement, while the day before or so in Parliament, the APS was basically saying, hey, we are at the beginning stage of this thing, but yet an agreement was rushed into. There's also an agreement between the ministry or the minister and the Chamber of Commerce, and we all know that the former Minister of Romi was the director of the Chamber of Commerce, and it would kind of raise eyebrows as to what this agreement entails. Seemingly it has to do something with land. And the renovation of the Point Blanche prison is also one of those decisions which is, in our opinion, questionable to say the least. And why I say questionable is because it would appear that the government took a decision. We have not yet seen, I have to request the documents, but from what I was made to understand, the prison had a public bid for renovations around the kitchen area, and that was won by a contractor for somewhere around $1 million guilders or something like that. And then the prison embarked on a bigger project which calls for the expansion and upgrading of the prison for somewhere in the tune of 13 million guilders. And then government is now using the fact that there was a public bid to upgrade the kitchen, the contractor that won that, without now putting the bigger project for the kitchen, for the prison on bid. Government has decided, or the minister has decided, to award that to the same contractor. Now we are saying that cannot be transparent, that cannot be open. It would be like you ask somebody to give me a quote on building a bathroom for a house, and when you get a quote to build the bathroom or to repair the bathroom, then you say, you know what, since you're here fixing my bathroom, why don't you build me a house? Now, if that's a private agreement, that is no problem, but government cannot, on the basis of a 1 million guilder renovation, grant a 13 million expansion to a contractor. Those are some of the preliminary findings, or rather, when I got the documents, not been able to go through all of them because of many other meetings and activities. There's so many things that we can talk about. There's so many issues that we would like to fix and introduce. But of course, as I said, the first order of the day for this government, and I think for the people of St. Martin as well, because if I did not conduct any scientific poll, but if I would go by what people are asking or telling in some cases, people meet you and there are two things: congratulations, but make sure we don't have any elections. We are happy we have a new government, but just make sure we don't have any elections because it makes no sense. There are those who would want to feel that the coalition, and if I speak for the National Alliance, as if they're afraid of elections. Absolutely not. The National Alliance is definitely not afraid of elections, but what we are convinced of, that if we hold elections without fixing the problem, we are going to be faced with the same outcome probably 6 months or 6 weeks or maybe a year after election. And then the people are going to say, you see? And many people are turned off from voting if we don't fix the problem. Because they say, we have already voted, we don't need an election again after 1 year. It's a waste of time. But if you fix it, then we are willing to deal with it. So I want to thank you for coming out, and I'm not dismissing you yet, but I want to thank you for coming out, and if there are any additional questions, after the other ministers have been given an opportunity, and if we have time left. I see I've used up half of the time already, so the other ministers still have time. But after the live press briefing, if you have questions for myself or for any of the other ministers, I'm sure they are happy to entertain same. Thank you.
It gives me great pleasure to actually be able to represent St. Martin as the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports. And I'd like to start my statements this morning with a update on some events that took place over the weekend. As I entered on Friday morning, the government of St. Martin, through its Department of Youth Affairs, the collectivity of French St. Martin, and the youth stakeholders were currently engaged in various activities in connection with the International Day of the Rights of the Child, which is celebrated on November 20th. So the first activity, the conference, started on Friday morning, and this program was held under the theme, Strong Families Nurture Strong Societies. It is focused on Articles 5 and 9 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. The calendar of events commenced on Friday, November 20th, with the official ceremony at the Bel Air Community Center, featuring government dignitaries and very inspirational presentations by various schools. The activities continued later in the afternoon with a youth rally, which ended right here at the Government Administration Building, and that was held under the theme of the Blue Ribbon, Team Blue Ribbon, and the Department of Sports. This is the first rally of its kind, and we aim in future rallies to have the participation of as many schools as possible. The theme of that rally was concerned with youth and child abuse, and so all of the participants projected that on their T-shirts, and that said, "It should not hurt to be a child." The Team Blue Ribbon was the winners of the Youth Desk Innovation Competition. The annual movie night will be held or hosted by the St. Martin Promoting Young Ambassadors, also held their movie. It will be at the Bel Air Community Center. The St. Martin Early Childhood Development hosted their sports day. That was very interesting to see all the toddlers taking part, as well as their parents, in several activities on Saturday. The weekend was filled with activities, and this weekend, actually, there will be on November 27th, a panel discussion hosted by the Voice of Our Children, a youth foundation, at the Bel Air Community Center at 9 a.m., as well as a public meeting later in the evening at 5 by the St. Martin Youth Parliament, which will be at the Parliament building under the theme also, Strong Families Nurture Strong Societies. The reason I bring this forward in the press briefing is that opening the papers subsequent to these activities, I still see the front pages hosting all the negative news on St. Martin. And I would like to commend our young people for what they do. And as a society, we can do our part as stakeholders by highlighting this in the media. So I take this opportunity to do so, as I'm very, very proud of what the youth department has been doing and continues to do in building the awareness of the community as well as of the youth on the issues that pertain to them. One of the major highlights coming up will be the Sports Day, and it is a friendly games hosted by the Department of Sports, Youth Affairs, and the French Collectivité. This year we'll be joined by Anguilla, St. Eustatius, which is regular, but also for the first time by St. Bart's. Over 300 athletes will be taking part at the Raoul Ehrlich Sports Complex on December 28th, 2015. The final activity for the Rights of the Child program will be a Christmas party for the invited children on December 13th. So quite a full list of activities for youth affairs and the other stakeholders as it pertains to highlighting the rights of our children. More information can also be found on our Facebook page, and I look forward to seeing even more participation by the community. The second topic that I would like to bring forward today is the Brown Pelican Sports Awards. This is, in fact, the first ever sports awards held in the country, St. Martin. And the Department of Sports felt that it was imperative to instill this event with a nationalistic theme, and thus the Brown Pelican was used as the name, which I find quite fitting. The imagery that was projected on that evening also, and the awards themselves, very fitting for a first annual event. The bar has been set quite high, and I look forward to us not only continuing, but to continue to improve on how we present these awards to our sports legends as well as athletes and icons. On May 28th, the department, to give you an update on how the idea came about or the actions came about, because these were part of actually some of our goals for the past years. I think even ministers before I was first minister in 2012 had it as a objective, as a goal, and the Department of Youth and Sports, which was one department at the time, also had it as a priority, but the actual execution thereof, planning thereof, never actually came about until this year. So in May 2015, the Department of Sports facilitated an informational seminar with all local sport governing bodies in their respective sports to inform them of the department's plan for the rest of 2015 and the beginning of 2016. One of said events was this Brown Pelican Sports Award. They distributed the nomination sheets to all the sports awards, and this is to elucidate to those who may be saying, but how they come about with these winners? So I want the public to know the process that was followed in nominating the nominees for the awards, as well as how the selection process went about. So there were 10 categories that were given out: male and female athlete of the year, best overall team, best sponsor in sports, best coach, international ambassador, best sports organization, best in sporting innovation, sport icon, and the best sporting school. I think those categories were very well chosen, and it was the intention of the governing bodies would meet with their associations and clubs and put forward the name to ratify the list.